Hello and welcome to this Edexcel A-Level Geography Essay Planning, and this is on interpreting questions and planning, and it is part 2 of the Evaluate series, and this time it's your turn. In part 1 we went in detail through an Evaluate question, we looked at reverse engineering it, and we looked at comparative judgment between two different essays and what the key components are. So now we're going to have a look at another title and work through the stages before you have a go yourself. So what is really important to remember is that this is a skill that takes a lot of time to develop. You're not going to be perfect first of all. Make sure that you follow these steps in order. As time goes on, you can shorten these steps, but for now it's really important that we do these in this order. That we do understand the command words, the key terms and the focus, that we do use the notes, your notes in your textbooks, along with the specification to help you get the key information. And it's also important to just keep referring back to the mark scheme and what's expected of you. Remember then, for the Evaluate questions, these will appear in coasts, and there will be one on the carbon or water cycle on the physical side of the course as well. This is what Evaluate means. It's how important certain factors are, which is very similar to assess, or how successful certain actions have been. As before with assess, you need to use case study evidence or information from a resource to back up your answer. But the biggest difference is it must have a clear and substantiated conclusion. That means your conclusion must include your key points and key bits of evidence to back up the final judgment and question to it. So that is vital. It's going to be a lot longer and a lot more detailed than the assess style of answer. So this is what we're going to look at. Evaluate the view that hard engineering approaches to coastal management produce more winners than losers. So I want you to find the command word, the focus, restrictions, and unwritten part of the questions. Pause the video now and have a go. Okay, so what have you got? So the command word is easy enough. It's evaluate the view. Now this is very different to what we've seen before. It's always been about evaluate the contribution, evaluate the factors, and I'll discuss this in more detail. The focus is hard engineering approaches to coastal management, and the restrictions are we've got to talk about producing more winners than losers. We're not talking about describing each of the hard engineering approaches, explaining how they work. We're not looking at discussing the advantages and disadvantages of them. We're looking at who are the winners and who are the losers, and do the winners outweigh the losers. Now, when we look at the unwritten parts of it, well, what could we say? Well, we could talk about soft engineering, sustainable management. I said the CMs. But what is important is this question is focused on an opinion. Other questions we've looked at have looked at how factors affect things. Therefore, the unwritten elements of this question are not as important. Here, the question is definitely asking you about hard engineering. It's not asking you about how important is something in creating this. Because when you're discussing how important something is in creating something else, you've got to talk about those other factors that also influence it. But for here, it's being much more specific. It's asking for an opinion. So it wouldn't be as relevant to discuss the other factors. So as always, what we're going to do is refer back to the specification. Where can we find the information that this relates to? So as I put on the next slide, or have your specification in front of you, and where can you see the information that we need to look at? So pause the video now and just have a look at where the information is going to come from. Off you go. So if we look at the specification, we can see these are the main elements to it. There are different approaches to it. So we've got hard engineering, and we're talking about groin, seawalls, riprap, revetments, offshore breakwaters. And we know that they're economically costly and directly alter physical processes. This could be relevant to the winners and losers. We've also got policies decisions can lead to conflicts and with perceived winners and losers. And here it's talking about some of the stakeholders, the different people who will be affected. So it might be homeowners, it might be local authorities and environmental pressure groups. And it also gives you some ideas of different case studies, Haysborough, Chittagong. And we can also see some of the issues around it. So if there was no coastal recession, no coastal protection, what would some of the losses be? Who would be some of the people affected? So if you are putting in coastal protection, these could be some of the winners as well. So it just gives you some of the ideas of the things you could be discussing within your essay. So when we come on to the essay, have a look at how we could structure it. Well, as always, we need an introduction, defining the key words and use the wording from the specification to help you. You might want to put and define hard engineering in its context, and also talk about soft engineering and how they work together. Make sure you define the winners and losers, and then your main points of your essay. Who are the winners and losers possibly, but also discuss there are winners and losers at local and national levels. Now, as it's an opinion-based essay, there are many different structures, and I'm not going to tell you which one. You can choose which one you want. It may be that you want to simply go down the different categories of economic, social, and environmental, and each paragraph can be looking at different winners and losers. You might talk about the winners of hard engineering, the losers of hard engineering, and then talk about alternatives. But remember what I said about do we need to go into detail of soft engineering? It could be that you go into the case study approach. Each paragraph could be a case study. But you need to be very careful that this doesn't become just a brief, tell me everything you know about this case study, which is what tends to happen when you take a case study approach like this. It is far better to have one of the other approaches and slip your case studies in and have one or two different case studies in each of the different paragraphs. The other ones you could look at is maybe having a paragraph for different types of engineering. So you could look at the winners and losers of groins or of seawalls and talk in more detail there. So if we have a look then, to go into a bit more detail, if you were going down the different economic, social, environmental, you could imagine each paragraph to be a mini answer to the question. So, for example, paragraph 1 could be evaluate the view that hard engineering produces more winners in economic terms. So, you've got to say, who are the economic winners? What examples could you draw on? It might be you're talking about the businesses saved, the improved infrastructure. For example, at Mappleton, they invested in the groins and the regrading to save the B1242, which had a wider regional impact. It helped with businesses, it helped with locals. It could also be that property values increase. There's an increase in tourism from the bigger beaches and better access. So who would the winners be on that? But there might be losers in economic terms. If there's money spent in one area, it means that there is an opportunity cost, so that money can't be spent elsewhere. Can't be spent in other towns and villages inland. It can't be spent on things like education or healthcare elsewhere as well. And remember, hard engineering is very expensive. So then you could go on and talk about social and environmental winners and losers as well. Another way that you could approach it would be to look at different types of engineering. So it might be evaluate the view that groins produces more winners than losers. So who would the winners be in terms of when groins are created? Well, it would be the businesses, the homeowners, where the groins are placed in front of. Could be businesses related to tourism. Tourists could benefit because they get a nicer area. It might be the bigger beach could protect the habitats on the foreshore, so it could have environmental benefits as well. So again, this could be quite easy to be able to put in different case studies, and as long as for each of the different paragraphs You're not just repeating the same thing. Businesses would win because land is protected. You could bring in different stakeholders into each of the different paragraphs. Remember, when you're talking about groins here, you don't have to give every winner and every loser, just examples of them. And if you give different winners and losers for seawalls, for offshore reefs, then you would have a wide range of different winners and a wide range of losers, as well as discussing a range of different hard engineering techniques. So when you look at it that way, then that could be a really beneficial way of setting out your essay. Finally then, just to finish off, do make sure that your essay is about the winners and losers, the different stakeholder groups. Don't just say some people would benefit because some people would lose. Be specific. Homeowners, businesses, people living in that village, people elsewhere. A national benefit is protecting Easington gas terminal because 20% of the energy is from gas, so it would give us energy security. Try and think the wider synoptic links. Do use evidence from different locations to back up your arguments, but don't get involved with the advantages and disadvantages of different schemes unless they are relevant to the winners and losers. Don't turn this into a discuss the positives and negatives of hard engineering. That's not the question. It is about different groups of people, the winners and the losers. So I hope you found that useful. Remember that you can have a look at the mark schemes as we go through as what we're looking at. And you could also use these different types of planning techniques, either this one for the whole essay, or you could look at this more paragraph-based essay style here. So you'd have your 3 different paragraphs. Please, if you've struggled with earlier essays, or if you're finding this one difficult, do the planning first. So just to go back to make sure what you do and what you don't do, have a look at this. Replay this video as many times as you want before having a go at writing your essay. And for this one, once you've done your planning, try and limit the amount of writing time to about 20 minutes, no more. Okay, thanks for watching. Good luck. See you soon.